The movie, My Teacher's Wife, Todd Boomer, a senior at Southport High School, finds himself in a situation where his math teacher, Roy Miller, refuses to sign his evaluation for Harvard due to failing a test, despite passing the entrance exams to Boston University. With his girlfriend, Kirsten, and friend, Paul, to distract himself, Todd starts drawing cartoons by the pond, where he hears a scream from the other shore, leading to an encounter with Vicky, who apologizes for her outburst, explaining her struggle to contain her emotions. Todd empathizes with Vicky's feelings and agrees to scream with her, but she disappears before they can do so. Later that evening, Todd and his friends attend a party, with Paul attempting to flirt while Kirsten invites Todd for a walk in the park. As they sit on a bench and share a kiss, Kirsten notices a condom in Todd's hand, causing her to feel offended as it was not the reason she invited him there. Meanwhile, Paul tries to avoid an annoying guest at the party. Todd was behind the wheel when Paul suddenly hopped into the car, urging him to leave the area swiftly. Along the way, they encountered Vicky, who was stranded by her broken-down car on the roadside. As they drew closer, Vicky recognized Todd from the incident at the lake where she had startled him with her screams. The guys decided to assist Vicky and offered her a ride, during which Paul tried to flatter her by complimenting her car, not realizing it belonged to her husband, who had forgotten to pack a spare tire. They made a pit stop at a diner, where Vicky arranged for a tow truck, but it wouldn't arrive for another hour. To pass the time, the guys treated Vicky to ice cream. Upon leaving, Vicky surprised them by paying for everyone, prompting Todd to suggest leaving a tip. Paul began calculating the amount needed, but Vicky swiftly did the math in her head and declared the total, attributing it to her prowess in the math department. After dropping Vicky off at her car, the guys persuaded her to join a math class with them, showcasing their camaraderie and the unexpected turn of events that brought them together on that eventful day. Vicky assures Todd that she will consider the matter and reach out to Todd if necessary. Upon returning home, Vicky encounters her husband, Roy Miller, who is also Todd's math teacher. Meanwhile, Todd's father expresses disappointment in Todd's academic performance, despite their efforts to get him into Harvard. Todd reveals that he has already found a tutor, making his father proud. Todd revisits the lake where he first met Vicky, only to be startled by a strange encounter involving a girl and a man with a gun, which turns out to be a dream. Later, Todd excitedly shares the news with Paul that Vicky has called him in chemistry class. Kirsten apologizes to her boyfriend for the previous incident in the park, explaining that she was simply too excited. Todd's desire can be fulfilled if he gives Vicky a little time. Once school is over, Vicky visits Todd's house, where they have the place to themselves as Todd's parents leave. The next day, Todd informs his friend Paul about this, and Paul helps him move out of his parents' house and into a separate house in the backyard. The time spent with Vicky in their classes proves to be valuable and rewarding. Todd expresses this to Vicky and invites her to another class later that evening. However, before meeting Vicky, Todd goes out with Kirsten after lying to her about his tutor being an elderly and unattractive woman. Kirsten reminds him of their traditional dinner with friends, but Todd promises to find a solution despite having his tutor class. Meanwhile, Kirsten visits Paul's diner while Todd is studying with Vicky. Even though Todd is not present, Kirsten doesn't want to leave Paul alone. Eventually, Todd arrives at the diner with Vicky, who agrees to give him a ride after their class. Todd's deception towards Kirsten leads to her leaving the diner, feeling offended by his actions. Seeking information from Paul, Todd tries to uncover if Kirsten has spoken to him about the situation. Despite Todd's wrongdoing, Vicky remains a point of interest for him. Kirsten later approaches Paul, hoping to gather information about Todd's words. Paul, aware of the situation, chooses to protect Todd by not revealing any details to Kirsten. However, he does mention that Kirsten is also considered a friend by Todd, which brings a smile to her face. In a math class, Todd impresses his teacher by correctly solving a problem presented by Roy Miller. The teacher acknowledges Todd's progress and suggests that university may be a viable option for him. Excited about his achievement, Todd shares the news with Vicky and invites her to another class. Vicky, intrigued by Todd's progress, invites him to her house to view her sculptures. Upon Todd's arrival, Vicky showcases her artwork, leaving Todd puzzled as to why she keeps them hidden in the garage. Vicky is filled with fear that people will perceive her as crazy, a sentiment that her husband shares. Despite their strained relationship, Vicky finds solace in the company of Todd, who appreciates her artistic talent. Todd expresses his gratitude for the gift Vicky has crafted and surprises her with a kiss. Although taken aback, Vicky does not allow him to repeat the gesture. They proceed to Vicky's house, where she flirts with Todd, leading to another kiss. Todd recounts this encounter to his friend Paul, who seems unimpressed. Todd assumes Paul is simply envious. Todd returns home while Paul opens the door to his cabin, where Kirsten is present and has overheard their entire conversation. Later, at lunch, Todd approaches Kirsten's table, only for her to gather her belongings and leave. Confused, Todd is left wondering what has transpired. Kirsten then announces to the entire cafeteria that she is aware of Todd's affair with the tutor. Paul was the one who informed Todd about the situation, leading Todd to believe he was the one who disclosed everything to the girl. However, Paul reveals that Kirsten was present at his cabin when Todd was discussing his classes with Vicky. Todd becomes upset with his friend, suspecting that he intentionally didn't warn him because of his feelings for Kirsten. Their argument is interrupted by Roy Miller, who punishes the boys by making them wash his car parked in front. Todd and Paul recognize the same Corvette that Vicky was near the night they picked her up. They come to the realization that Roy Miller is Vicky's husband. Todd, upon discovering that Roy is going fishing, decides to visit Vicky's house. He is disappointed that she never mentioned her husband being Roy Miller, who also happens to be his teacher. Vicky seems indifferent to the situation, causing Todd to question her decision to marry Roy, whom he perceives as a tyrant. Vicky explains that Roy wasn't always like that, but Todd's visit is interrupted by Roy's return from fishing, prompting him to investigate the commotion in the garage. As he approaches the garage, Roy calls out to Vicky, prompting Todd to hide among the sculptures while Vicky pretends to work on her concepts. Meanwhile, Roy cleans the fish, unaware that Todd has hidden elsewhere. On his way out, Roy asks Vicky for a printer to print a recommendation for Todd Boomer, a bright student in his class, to get into Harvard. Vicky promises to find a printer, and Todd quietly leaves the garage when Roy departs. At school, Roy approaches Todd before class, offering to reveal what he found in Vicky's garage. He shows Todd his school notebook, causing the boy to panic, thinking Roy knows about him and Vicky. However, Miller shows Todd his test results, revealing only 2 mistakes. Roy finds the notebook and suspects Todd is studying math with Vicky. Miller promises to write a recommendation for Todd to go to university, shaking the boy's hand in approval. In math class, Roy uses Todd as an example to motivate the other students, believing that his tough approach will help them learn better. Todd confronts Roy about his cruel treatment of students, with Vicky also disapproving. Miller questions Todd about his involvement with Vicky, prompting Todd to confess. Roy rushes home while Todd tries to warn Vicky, but she misses the call. Roy arrives home, enraged, destroying things in the garage until Todd shows up. Surprisingly, Roy admires Todd and credits him for his improved math skills, thanks to Vicky's help and their affair. Miller recommends Todd for Harvard, but Roy knocks him out. When Todd wakes up, he apologizes to Vicky, who admits she should have left Roy sooner. Vicky plans to move to New York for her sculptures. Todd has an interview and promises to visit Vicky in New York. At the interview, Todd is asked why he wants to go to Harvard in the first place. According to the kid, it is his father's dream, as it is the best university, but Todd himself believes that it is not exactly what he needs. Back home, Todd admits to his parents that he does not want to go to Harvard. His dream is art. His father accepts his son's choice. Todd goes to the diner where they constantly gather with friends, calling Kirsten for a walk. Todd apologizes for hurting the girl, but begs her never to cross him off her list of friends. Sometime later, the trio sits on the dock and discusses who they will be in 10 years. According to Todd, Paul will be working on his supercomputer in 10 years, and Kirsten will be releasing her first collection of popular poetry. Todd himself, according to Paul, will be shouting the phrase, "free cash register," at McDonald's. That's where the movie ends.